Welcome back to our Reframe the Future, where Chris and I will be discussing all things social and digital with Andrew Bruce Smith. In this episode, we will be discussing the recent trends in communications and the impact on trust. So, in your view, Andrew, how has recent activity changed the way we view communications, particularly on digital channels? How do you think our trust in social content and the content that we consume has changed over the last few years?
Great question. I always like to start around the concept of trust with Edelman's trust barometer. So for those that aren't aware of it, this is probably the kind of longest running survey in the PR industry. So for the last 22 years, Edelman, the PR firm, has conducted a global survey asking people, who do you trust? What do you trust? And certainly, I've always been fascinated by people's responses to the media that they trust, the channels that they trust, and certainly over the last, I think I'm right in saying, last 5 years or so, when people are asked anywhere in the world, pretty much, what is the kind of the source that you trust the most, and it's Google search results. Now you might find that quite alarming, but that's the reality that we seem to have this notion that Google's terribly clever. And if I search for something, the results they give back to me are the right answer, if that's the right way to characterize it. So Google search results trusted more than traditional media. Actually, social media, again, as evidenced by the Edelman Trust Barometer and lots of other surveys, tends to rank pretty low in terms of a source that we apparently trust. I mean, that's what we say. It's a separate question as to, but even if we don't appear to trust it, it can still influence us. But again, I think it keeps coming back to this notion that with Google search, the irony there is that if say a piece of media coverage or say a tweet is surfaced in a research result, does that mean I'm more likely to trust it because Google says it's the right answer versus whether I encountered that piece of coverage or that tweet in situ in the channel in which it first originated. So I think that's definitely an example of where kind of trust in specific kind of channels and sources of information is kind of clearly evolving. And I guess our challenge is to try and figure out what that means in terms of both how we formulate our communications approaches, but equally the effect it's likely to have on those audiences.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And talking of trust, it's been really interesting to kind of see the recent activity over Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, and also what this could mean for the future of social media and our trust in it. Not just what we're consuming on there, but also with our data and the brand's activities and stuff like that. So it's difficult to know what the future holds of that, but it's definitely been interesting to look at over the last few days.
Yes, indeed. I think it was the physicist Niels Bohr who said that, yes, predictions are extremely difficult, especially about the future. So I think he's entirely correct on that one. I have no crystal ball. For example, Mastodon, is that suddenly going to be the new Twitter? I think as if I have putting a bet in it, I don't think so. But what do I know? I years ago thought that CompuServe would be AOL. I got that one totally wrong. So it's it's a fool's errand. Nevertheless, I think there clearly are specific sort of trends that I think are indicative of where things are heading. Just to pick a couple, the rise of TikTok, not just as a channel, but in the rise of the so-called short form video. That clearly is having an impact in a number of ways. First of all, TikTok, if you look back over the last 2 or 3 years, TikTok and ironically LinkedIn are the two social channels that have really continued to thrive and to grow, not just in terms of the numbers of people on those platforms, but the amount of time that people are spending on it. But the rise of TikTok is, as I say, having an influence in a number of ways. The rise of short form video is influencing other platforms. Look at Facebook. They're pivoting more towards using that kind of short form video content. But even Google in Google search is suggesting there's an impact there. The suggestion that certainly younger people, to use that terrible phrase, are more likely to use TikTok as a source of information, effectively to use TikTok as though it were a search engine, to use the search feature in TikTok to seek out information rather than using Google itself. So modifying people's search behavior in that way, I think, is really interesting. And again, that idea of using social platforms as social search engines, the idea that you don't just open up the app and kind of mindlessly scroll in the feed, although that's what we all do, but to proactively use the search facility to proactively seek out information based on your kind of interest or what you're seeking, and using it, as I say, as a social search engine. The other area I think that's definitely worth paying attention to is the role of online advertising, and I guess I'm specifically thinking here in the context of web display advertising or programmatic. If you just look at the to quote all the president's men, follow the money, and I mean, gargantuan amounts of money are spent on programmatic advertising through the web. I believe the estimates are certainly for 2023, recessions aside, we're still looking at probably $300-400 billion globally spent on online display advertising. That kind of dwarfs pretty much everything. And yet, consider this, ad blocking. Apparently more than half of all web users, and we're talking 2 billion plus people, routinely block online display ads. It's conceivably the biggest protest movement in history. 2.2 billion people who say, no, thank you, I don't want to see your ads. So does that mean automatically that 300-400 billion, it's a waste? Because even if the ads serve, real people aren't going to see it. So I think what we will start to see is, I guess, an acknowledgement of, well, what do real human beings actually get exposed to? I think in the online ad industry, there's been definitely an overemphasis on the notion that, well, the ad was served, therefore I'm assuming that a real person with eyeballs and a brain actually was exposed to it. And I mean, we could spend an entire podcast on all the issues around programmatic, whether that's viewability, fakes, etc. But I think that those are kind of two examples of where I would suggest it's fairly self-evident that we can see where things are going. We can see real effects. We've got a good sense of where that's likely to take us.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, TikTok has definitely taken over, and we've had quite a few discussions about whether it's the channel to use to reach kind of certain audiences or people living with certain conditions. It may not be the channel for every brand or disease area, but it's definitely worth looking into the conversations taking place and using those insights from that search on TikTok as well. With that, we will close our second episode with Andrew. In our next episode, we'll be discussing the all-important measurement and benchmarking.